Welcome to the Art of Healing podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to helping you connect with your mind, body, and spirit. This is Charlize, physician and Reiki master, and thank you so much for joining me. I would like to remind you that although I'm a physician, the information you receive in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. You can find my full disclaimer at my website, www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. If you like what you hear on this podcast, sign up for my weekly newsletter. Check your show notes for more information and for the link to sign up. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to the Art of Healing podcast. This is Charlize. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. So I recently completed a book called The 21-Day Meditation Journey. And in this book, there was several concepts I wanted to build on. I created the book for beginning meditation students or advanced or whoever who just wants a little bit of structure and maybe get a program going for themselves. And one of the concepts I discuss in the book is going to be how we sit. So for the majority of meditation practices, they'll be seated. Of course, you can do them standing, you can do them lying down, but the majority of your meditation practice will probably be seated on a comfortable chair. So for this podcast, I'm going to have a few drawings that'll be available. You'll be able to see those in the show notes, and I'll post those on social media. And before we get too far into those talks, I'd like to point out those hand drawings were created by me. They are especially crafted with my wonderful drawing skills. And before we go much further, if you'd like to take a few moments to laugh at my pictures, I might laugh at them myself, even though I created those pictures months ago. I haven't bothered to improve them. Just keep using them. And so let's go ahead and get some laughter out of them. Like, oh my gosh, look at her drawings. All right, now that we've got that done, I would like to read a passage from my book. So the book is organized by days. It's 21 days, 21 separate exercises. And day 6 is establishing a firm foundation or sitting well. So for this, basically for day 6, it's a particular meditation in which you focus your attention on how you're sitting in order to support breathing very easily. So when I say sit well, what I'm referring to is you're sitting in a way that allows your pelvis to be supported on the chair and allows for your back to be upright, and then allows for you to inhale and exhale comfortably. And if you're sitting well, you also should be able to relax your shoulders so that they don't kind of scrunch up towards your ears. And this allows for you to be in meditation comfortably for as long as you desire. So from my book, the passages, it may be helpful for this meditation to identify your ischial tuberosity or your sit bones. These are the bony parts of the pelvis that you want to rest your weight on while you're seated. Once you're seated, you may use your hand to move the flesh of your buttocks towards the outside to make sure you're sitting in a fashion that allows for spinal alignment. So to sit well, there are a few things that may help. And the sitting well practice, you don't have to do just in meditation. You actually want to do this anytime you're seated. So if you're listening to the podcast in a place where you're seated, for example, if you're listening at work when you're supposed to be working and you're pretending you're on a teleconference call, but you're really listening to the podcast, I usually have a very serious tone, but I know what you guys do because I do it too. But so if you're sitting at your desk and you're pretending to work, you can practice sitting well. So you want to start with your feet, and you want to make sure that the way you're seated allows you to plant your feet firmly on the ground. And once they are planted, this should allow for your knees to be at roughly a 90-degree angle when they're bent. And that should also allow for your hip joint, where your thigh meets your pelvis, to also be at roughly a 90-degree. One challenge many of us will run into, depending on height and the equipment, wherever you're seated, at home office or work office, is that the seating may not allow for you to sit properly because you need to elevate your feet. So, and I was actually taught this from a clinic I worked in. The secretary pointed that out to me, that the way I was sitting didn't allow me to sit comfortably. I thought, oh, she's right. I need to elevate my feet. So that can be done if you're at home. If you have like yoga blocks, you can use that to rest your feet on, or large books. Or if you are in an office setting, you want to put your feet on one of those stools that helps to adjust you. So then also, if you're sitting, for example, at a desk with a computer, then the computer should be at a level where your neck can be straight and you can look straight ahead. You shouldn't have to angle your head upward or downward too much. So again, that may require some adjustment, such as a desk raiser. And then, of course, if you're in meditation, you're preparing yourself for a quiet moment, you want to make sure that if there is a back, that it can gently support you so that it doesn't keep you from moving. Or if you're setting up for meditation practice, you may feel more comfortable in a chair where you can scoot away from the back and hold yourself upright. I personally, decide to meditate that way. If I'm seated, I found that the back of the chair will prevent me from taking really deep breaths, because the more experienced you become in meditation, the deeper you're breathing, you'll find that you expand your entire cavity, chest cavity and back cavity, and everything will start to expand with more practice. So it may feel better not to put your back against the chair. But if you're new to meditation, or you don't have much endurance, or if you've been ill recently, if you're ill now, if you're suffering from an illness, either acute or chronic, then you do want to rest your back against the chair. And if the chair doesn't allow for you to sit with the feet firmly planted, with the knees at a nice angle, with the hip at a 90-degree angle, then you use a cushion behind you, which will push you forward in the chair. So I know it's a pretty lengthy discussion, but basically you'll probably need to adjust how you sit unless you found a perfect chair to use. Once you've got all of that settled, the chair should allow for you to relax your arms and your hands, where you can have them resting on your thighs, and your shoulders should be able to naturally drop. So your shoulders should be able to drop. You should be able to expand your chest and belly without any constrictions. And from there, it becomes very easy to have the neck aligned with the thoracic spine and the lumbar spine. And when those are aligned, that holding that upright posture won't tire you. So in my book, I put special emphasis on this because for a lot of people, when they first start to meditate, they're very uncomfortable. It's very hard to hold that seated posture. It's hard to hold still at all. But if you practice getting into that position and you practice finding what's going to be comfortable for you. And one of the things I like, with podcasting and, with a lot of this media, is that I can share with you how I'd recommend to do it, but you don't have much of a visual. And I think that's almost better because everyone's body is going to be different. So for some individuals, they will feel very comfortable sitting cross-legged on the floor in what's called easy pose, or even a lotus pose, with their one leg crossed over the other, tucked in tightly. in my meditation practice, that is my preference, is to sit in easy pose on the floor, sometimes on a cushion or sometimes without. For others, they're going to get more out of that practice in a nice firm chair, seated, where they can breathe comfortably and there's no concern about getting up from the floor. Especially any people with osteoarthritis in the knees or the hips, you get all the benefit from the practice from a nice chair. You may have a favorite place like a couch or a love seat. So even there, you can play around with, do you want to sit cross-legged on the couch if it has enough room, or do you want to sit well, but then use some of the cushions to support your back? So again, as you're listening or you're considering how you're going to do this, or again, if you're at work and you're pretending you're working, you're not working, you're listening to a podcast on meditation, you can play around with what works for you. And you'll know it's working if you sit in that posture and you can take a nice big inhale and a nice big exhale with no effort. So that's the key. If you can take that breath in and out and it feels good and you didn't feel like you strained in any way, that's your seated posture. But if you took a breath and it felt like it's hitched up or hung up in your neck, or like your belly won't expand, then revisit. And I would say just start from the feet up. Feet, check the knees, check where your hips are. Do you need to support your back? Is the seating high enough or low enough? So just revisit that. But if you're starting on any kind of meditation, even if you meditate now, I would definitely advise playing with the SitWell for a while so that you know your body and you can get comfortable. And it doesn't have to be just a meditation. When I'm at work, when I'm between patients, when I sit at my desk to work, I frequently will check myself. I try to really every few minutes to make sure I'm sitting well, to make sure I'm not hunching my shoulders and slouching my back, and curving my spine and holding my breath, which brings us to Ouchy Slouchy. Ouchy Slouchy. I know there's probably scientific names for these, but it's my podcast, my website, it's my book. I'm gonna call it Ouchy Slouchy. So what is Ouchy Slouchy? So that's my term for the kind of what we see and what we all do, which is when you're in a seated posture and you're very stressed, and you're feeling overwhelmed, or just, you just kind of gotten used to sitting that way. And you have your shoulders are hunched towards your ears. You pull up your shoulders and you let your belly stick out, and your chest, rather than nice and open with your breastplate or sternum facing forward, is caved in. It's caved in. And while you're sitting that way, your head is, rather than sitting right on top of your cervical spine, where it's getting the most support, it starts to pull forward. Your head pulls forward, so maybe even the top of your head's actually facing forward. And this is the posture we take on during times of stress. And this is also what we do when we tend to hold our breath, where we're going to have a period of time where we're holding our breath, thinking, maybe focusing on being productive and getting something done. Some podcasts back, we did a practice exercise where we created an anxiety attack. And we did that by scrunching our face, holding our breath, slouching, and thinking really, damaging negative thoughts about things that we can't change. So Ouchy Slouchy is definitely part of that whole habit of sitting with the belly poking out, letting the spine curve forward so the chest caves forward. And when you're in Ouchy Slouchy, the key with that posture is that you really can't take a deep breath, or you're breathing very rapidly. So of course, depending on where, you can definitely try that now. And in Ouchy Slouchy, the key is you really don't know what your feet and your legs are doing, but you're going to slouch forward and let your belly stick out. And then either my Ouchy Slouchy is I just hold my breath. I just don't breathe for like 10 minutes. Like I just hold my breath for like half an hour. And then I'm like, oh, I haven't taken a breath. But for your Ouchy Slouchy, it may be rapid, like very shallow breaths. With these breaths, your belly doesn't go in and out. So it's all in the chest. So it may be like that. And so when we sit in Ouchy Slouchy, you can see how that's a setup. That's an absolute setup to start to feel mental fatigue, to feel your mood slide, to feel your productivity slide. And then days and days and weeks and months of that, that's definitely the breeding ground of developing things like anxiety, stress-related illness. So such a simple concept, just how you're sitting, but it's something that I feel like can constantly be revisited. In my clinical practice, I actually will tell my patients while I'm evaluating them as we start the visit and they tell me what brings them in. And typically, Ouchy Slouchy, I'll identify someone that comes in with neck pain and upper back pain, particularly pain in the back, in that area of the trapezius, which is where the shoulders. It's the muscle that connects the shoulders to the spine. You can find your trapezius basically by taking one hand and reaching across your back, and if you place your hand there, likely you're landing somewhere on the trapezius. So for those individuals, I often point out to them that if they're their work situation changed and they're working from home and maybe haven't had a chance to adapt their work environment to be optimal, that they're often seeing slouch and pulling the shoulders forward or hunching them and putting a lot of strain on the same set of muscles that create spasms, and that goes on to create pain in those areas. So have a look at the show notes. And then, of course, my book, 21 Day Meditation Journey, Starting Your Inner Journey to Health and Wellness, is available on Amazon. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I'll make sure I notify you when I have freebies. There are opportunities to get copies of the book for free. And who doesn't want free? Just grab a copy. You don't pay anything. And then I also frequently have some other freebies like ebooks and checklists and everything. And so I would definitely recommend, if you're interested, signing up for my newsletter so that I can let you know when one of those are coming out. As always, thank you so much for joining me for today's podcast. And I will talk with you next week. I wish you a SitWell week. Nice, firm feet planted, straight back, easy breathing. And thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Art of Healing podcast. Once again, this is Charlize. You can find out more about me at www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. Did you know I have a blog as well as online courses? Check your show notes to sign up for more information about Healing Arts Health and Wellness. Thank you. Please feel free to share this episode with your friends, family, and loved ones.